There's Tom.
Sue, I can hear you. I can't see you.
Well, that's because 2 hours ago I had a tooth pulled and I'm not very pretty,
Oh,
so.
I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully everything going okay, though.
Well, it doesn't hurt anymore, so that's a good thing, right? And I got ice cream for supper. It's all good.
Vanilla, nothing with nuts in it, right?
Correct. Correct.
All right. I'm just waiting we got a couple of minutes here until I just wanted to bring this on, and then Craig should be jumping on any second. He usually takes a second or two to try to get in. So,
Well, I was just saying that I expected you presently that I don't know about everybody else, but my computer runs 7 minutes faster than real time. So at least I'm never late for anything.
well, there you go. That's one way to do it. I should try that little trick with Craig and see if I can get his to do that way. All right, I'm going to bring up my screen to share and hopefully get this set up so that it is in the right place here. All right, so hopefully you should just be able to see my screen right now.
Does anybody else have a loud, not a loud, but a high pitch? Oh, it's going away. Never mind.
I wonder if that had anything to do with whatever happened with your tooth earlier.
Well, I did let out some loud, high-pitched screeches, but
I will tell you, Sue, this is, for everybody who's on the call here, Doug McPherson and I played, I think, in the last day of the virtual golf last Friday. Yeah. As I was saying to somebody else, right, the idea of the virtual golf, it was fun. We had a great time, but the rain that was coming down during our round last Friday, if you remember some of the torrential downpours we got, was not virtual in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I thought of you that day because I knew you were golfing the last day, and I said, he's getting drenched.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a good time. It was funny, though. I told him at the end we forgot to take pictures, and then I was like, well, you know what? We would just be a soggy mess at that point. So it was a better thing that we didn't take any pictures.
I would have led with that next year.
Yes. So this is what could happen to you if we do that. All right. Where is Craig? Where is he in this whole thing? I'm going to give him another 30 seconds or so, and then I'm going to start up, and then hopefully he comes chiming in at some point, or he's trying to connect, and I just can't see him and all of that, because I want to make sure we don't take too much time here and go through everything. If one of those bopping in is Craig, just let me know. Yep. No, can't. There he is.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. I figured you were coming in at some point. I was just getting ready to start up. All right. So, and you can see the screen just fine, right? Just the
Yep.
the documents that there. Okay, appreciate that, everybody. So let's get started here. Sue, I didn't know. Did you want to say anything before I start up? Just let me.
No, I just want to thank Tom Alessi and Craig Richardson from the Moody Street Group for making this presentation tonight for us. And just to let you know that I've gotten at least half a dozen requests from people for a link to the recording because they can't make it tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's what we were going to let everybody know as part of it is that we will be sharing the link back with Sue. And then Sue, whatever you want to do with it, if you want to send it out to everybody, because there are some screens at the end where we talk about some of the resources that are all links. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit easier if you have that to be able to just slow it down and look at it yourself or take it from there and go through it. But yes, we will definitely be getting that out to you. So yeah, however you want to deal with that or post it or share it to them, that's fine, and glad to do that. Okay, appreciate the intro and thanks for being here tonight, everybody. A little different. We're always trying to adapt here and do this by webinar. So what we're going to do tonight is this is legal documents, government benefits, and some different resources to be thinking about as we go through this. As Sue said, the presentation tonight is by myself, Tom Alessi, and I'll bring Craig in a second to introduce himself. We are from the Moody Street Group. I'll go through that in a second. Disclosures, really, this is just, what we say to everybody is this is meant for educational information. If you have questions, whether that's, legal, tax, or financial, always seek out the help and guidance of a professional in order to do that. We're trying to give you some information, try to, give you a little bit to think about and some of the things to move forward with. But if you do ever decide or have questions in any of those areas, just always seek out the help of a professional when going through that. All right, so this is us, the Moody Street Group. There's a lot of words on the screen. I'm not going to spend the time and talk through them because, frankly, we're just not that important. The idea here is we are a boutique financial services firm. The word boutique we use because it rhymes with our favorite term, which is unique, which in the financial services world, we are a little bit unique. One of the things that we do is we do dedicate a portion of the firm to our special needs resource network. The concept behind the special needs resource network is to support a family with a child who is either differently abled or has a disability. The goal for the special needs resource is we're always trying to connect with as many organizations, advocates, and other professionals that we can. And that's really what we're trying to do in all of this. We are in Newton, just if anybody wants to know where we are in the world, though with Zoom and everything else, it's like, who cares? Everything's virtual now. All right, so a little bit about us, Tom and Craig, right? So I am Tom. I've been in financial services. I actually in my 21st year now. I am an investment advisor, which means I am acting as a fiduciary whenever I deal with any of my clients, and I deal more on the investment and in securities side of the business. Craig, you want to just chime in a little bit about you?
Sure. So as the screen says, I've been a financial advisor for the last, services representative for the last 16 years. I work primarily with small businesses and families, helping them develop a financial blueprint. And I've been working in the special needs arena for the better part of 10 years now.
Terrific. Thank you, sir. And Craig will be chiming in every now and then as we're going through this with a little bit of info, a little bit of detail. So just a little pre-flight checklist for everybody. We do ask you to be muted. We absolutely appreciate any questions that you want to do. We do have a Q&A set up at the end. There is also, however, a chat box. That's the other reason Craig is sort of my co-pilot in all of this. He'll be watching that. And if you do have questions when they come up, just let us know. We'll certainly try to get them answered. If you want your cameras on, go ahead. We usually try to keep them off just because they get a little distracting. And in my case, my background and green screen just all went on the fritz on me. So that's why it sort of looks the way it does. But Craig will also keep me moving along. So if you get a chance, if you can hear me and we want to practice a little bit, just say yes in the chat box or just say okay, thumbs up, however you want to do it, just to let us know that we are moving in the right direction and everybody can hear everything. Did you get anything, Craig? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, I got a thumbs up.
Perfect.
Yep.
Terrific. Thank you for that, because I just want to make sure. All right, one of the things, as after the presentation, we will be sending out, these are evaluation forms. We ask for feedback and input from everybody who sits through one of our presentations, because we do these at organizations. Like we said, we try to connect with as many organizations, support groups, CPACs, et cetera, that we can. So we do value the input and feedback we get from everybody. So really, as part of that, if you can take the time, send it back to us. We'll have a little gift for you if you do that. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I'll give you a reminder at the end. But we will be sending that out to you with just a note to say, hey, if you can do us a favor, for being in the call tonight, if you can just send this back and just let us know, and we'll take it from there. We do appreciate that. All right. So what steps should you be considering, going through with this? When we talk about some of these legal documents, we'll go through the, a will and testament, power of attorney, general durable power of attorney and how that works, and then a durable power of attorney for healthcare. Additionally, we'll talk about a letter of intent if it's something that you've either started or done or haven't tried to do. ways to think about some of the things to do with that. We will talk about guardianship. It ties into that durable power of healthcare. And then just some of the different things that can go along. We're not going to go into the trusts and any of the funding with that tonight. That's a completely different subject and conversation. Is something that we can help with if it ever comes to that, or you want to get a little bit more detail on it. But we will talk a little bit about resources at the end and what's available. All right, so a will, right? So this we're talking about for everybody, not just families, but individuals. Everybody should have a will. Craig, how many times do we sit down with someone and they don't have a will set up?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so a will really just is directing where your stuff is going to go, right? I pass, where do I want my stuff to go? The issue that comes up with this is that if you have underage children, and by that we mean they have not reached 18, the age of majority, and for lack of a better way of explaining it, the court is going to treat them like more stuff, and they are going to decide who's going to be responsible for those children. You are out of the conversation at that point. You don't have any control. And so this becomes a really a concern when we're talking about even, forget typical children, but when we're talking about somebody who's differently abled or has a disability, this is a factor that you want to make sure has been addressed and put in place. Craig, you want to go through a little bit more on that? Did I lose you? He goes in and out sometimes. Never mind. I'm moving on. In terms of dealing with it. If he comes back, he'll come back. But you just want to make sure that you're naming somebody who's able to carry out those wishes should something happen to you. If you're married, if something happens to both of you, obviously. But even for an individual, you have things that need to be dealt with, and the will is the way that's going to dictate where they go. So number one thing always to have, if you haven't done one, to set up and start doing them. Put it on the 2021 to-do list or your New Year's resolutions. Because that's what happens is without a will, basically the state will control where those assets go. The court will name an administrator, someone who's going to act on your behalf, and that same person may or may not necessarily be the guardian for your kids. And it's, again, you have no control in that. And so that's the biggest factor here, why a will is so important in this. We forget the tax savings because that's just talking about how you're trying to, move an estate and that type of thing. It's important in terms of dealing with everything, but not when we're dealing with the kids. When we're trying to deal with the children, the idea is making sure that the will directs the guardian that you want in place. We'll talk about guardianship in a little while. Towards the end of this, and really it's all about the state making that call, right? This is just family court. This is somebody who's going to decide, and they're not going to spend a lot of time making the determination, and it may end up going to the children may end up going with somebody that really is either not equipped to handle them or frankly doesn't want to do it. Right? Now that becomes a different conversation, but it needs to be something that's done. A will needs to be set up. You need to have it, let's not write this out on a napkin, right? This needs to be something that needs to be done. Most wills today, attorneys can do them, and it's fairly quick and fairly easy to do because they've got everything set up and going through it. You just want to make sure, because the other side of that, as the screen says, is some of those assets that you may have could get directed to your child, and we'll talk about the benefits and government programs in a second, but those can be taken away, right? That's part of this. If you don't name, the assets can get distributed evenly, and that's not something you wanted to see happen. So first thing in place, always make sure if you haven't done a will that the will gets done, and that should be the first priority to set you up. every attorney nowadays is going to do 3 things with you if you go to them for a will.
Hey, Tom, I have a question for you.
Cool.
This is from
Did you
Jack.
disappear on me? Where did you go?
My screen froze, so I fixed that problem.
Okay.
So I have a question here from Jacqueline, and it
Yes.
says, as guardian, it should be a single person, correct? So they do not become property if you left them to a couple and they get divorced. I'm assuming she means assets.
So as far as having an executor, as you can have co-executors, if I'm following, and I think I'm following the question correctly, that there can be co-executors in case one of them is either no longer around or no there, or you can name a successor trustee. Same conversation, because what happens a lot sometimes with estates and dealing with things is that someone doesn't want to do it anymore. Like, I've been responsible for this now for the last 5 years. I don't want to do it anymore. So I'm giving up my right as the trustee. In that case, it always makes sense to have a successor. Depending on the age of the kids, if we're talking about guardian for a kid, guardianship goes until age 18.
Right, but I also think the question probably is about, assets. As a guardian, would they be, who would own the assets? The guardian?
No. The guardian would only, the trustee or guardian in this case, if you're referring to it, would only have access to the benefit of the individual, the receiver, the beneficiary.
So if you set it up in a trust, correct? Because if there was no trust and the assets were left to a guardian for the benefit of the child, could those become marital assets?
Oh, yeah. No. That's a different car. Yeah, that's back. Right. So I see what you're saying now. So in that situation, right? So if we're talking about, I left money to my brother, he's going to then watch my kids with
Right.
that money. Well, that money's in his name. And this is one of the things we talk about a lot, which is, while great intentions, there are those unforeseen consequences. And that number one unforeseen consequence, like Craig said, is that this could be a marital asset. If a divorce occurs, that's a split. That money is split in half. A creditor, the same thing that can happen. Or, my brother Johnny just decides to take off with the money. That can happen. There's nothing holding him or the courts to dictate that money is then used for the benefit of the beneficiary.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for answering that.
No, I appreciate the question. Thank you. That's a great question. So as I started to say, that any attorney nowadays will, if you go to them for a will, they're going to set you up with 3 will plus a power of attorney, and then I'll talk about healthcare proxy in a second. Those are the 3 components that you're going to get when you do this. Now, one of the things is, depending on your situation, your marriage, your kids. My case, my youngest happens to be 18 years old. So the last time we updated our will was 18 years ago, and didn't, until I looked at it recently, didn't realize that all we had was a will. So we didn't have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy to go along with it. So we had to get that updated. There's nothing wrong with the will. It's just we didn't have those other components as part of it. And the reason you want a power of attorney is it allows somebody to act on your behalf if you are unable to. That's the durable portion of that. They will always give you a durable power of attorney. Durable power of attorney means I'm allowing somebody to act on my behalf should I become incapacitated or unable to do that.
And Tom, if you're a married couple, do you still need the general durable power of attorney?
Yes. Because there are certain accounts, if my wife and I, if I become incapacitated, my retirement accounts are mine. She cannot get at them or talk to anybody about my accounts unless I give authorization to do that. Same thing with a life insurance contract, anything that's individually owned. Unless you've got that power of attorney to do it, they will not talk to you.
Is that even if they're listed as beneficiaries on your 401k and your insurance?
Correct, because the beneficiary only comes into play as if you pass.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So if you pass away, then you are the beneficiary. You're now the owner. But until that happens, if you think of it this way, I always have the ability or the right to change the beneficiary. So you as the beneficiary, you're there in holding, but you have no ownership to the contract.
Right. Okay.
But that's why. And so one of the things with this, and the reason I brought my youngest into this and 18 years old is because while she was supposed to go away to school right now, UMass Amherst, and they're remote at this point, so she's still here. But one of the things that I was thinking about doing was getting a durable power of attorney for her. God forbid if something happened or there was some situation that came up at school. Right now, I could not have a conversation with them about her if a situation occurred and she was there. So it's one of those things to be thinking about that, wait a minute, now that the child is 18, there's nothing I can do because they're 18. They've reached age of majority. They're now an adult. I'm not involved. I can't ask questions, just like Craig was asking about, as a husband and wife or beneficiary, and that question, you can't join the conversation. The only way you can do that, and sort of brings me to the next one, which is the rules and restrictions. This is on, as you go through it with every state is a little bit different, but for the most part, they'll all generally fall in the same lines. But it's I didn't get to the healthcare part. I will. So this is just it's really designed, if you do it in the correct way with a power of attorney, that it allows you to direct how the money may be distributed or how gifts may be done. So this comes into the conversation about if I want to make sure that, say, there was some funding to a trust to be done, or maybe an ABLE account was set up and I wanted to have some money going that way, but now I'm not able to direct that. My power of attorney can then step in and say, no, every year they wanted to be doing the $15,000 to an ABLE account or that type of thing. So you just want to make sure that there's wording in language that allows whoever that power of attorney is to have that freedom, that ability to do that.
Hey, Tom, I got another question.
Sure.
This is from Kirsten. Can you get power of attorney if someone is already incapacitated?
That one I'm going to have to check on. My understanding, I'm giving you this off just my understanding and basic knowledge of it, is no.
Well,
right.
You'd probably have to go through the court.
Right. You would then you're filing for a situation, but even at that, and we'll follow up with it because it does bring up that question of who would have access to, like the other question that came in about being the beneficiary. In that situation, I believe the beneficiary can file for some sort of ruling to say the owner has become incapacitated now. I'm the beneficiary, so I should be able to have at least understanding or knowing what's going on in the account.
Well, I guess it all depends on the situation too. If you're dealing with, say, an adult child, then are you going for guardianship, which would give you power of attorney?
Right. Well, again, depending on how that guardianship is set up, and we'll talk about guardianship in a little bit, whether it's full guardianship or whether we're just dealing on the financial side, conservatorship, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? But that's the idea. What I was trying to get to is this just talks a little bit about that make sure that any of those distributions that might be occurring are only going to where they're being directed or should go, so that whoever the power of attorney is not making a distribution without understanding that those funds could not go to an individual who's getting government benefits. So you want to make sure that if the distribution is occurring, it's going to either a trust that's been set up, as Craig mentioned, or to an ABLE account, or some way that it's not being counted against the individual. Because if the power of attorney doesn't understand or know that, it just says to give $5,000 to Johnny, well, we didn't know that $5,000 to Johnny was now going to completely eliminate any of the benefit and programs that he was getting. So you just want to make sure that's all in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I got to living will and healthcare proxy, but it's all right. I understand what I'm doing. I know what I did in terms of this now. You got to understand, it's a webinar, so we have fun with this. So the other component in Massachusetts, I don't know, I assume everybody is somewhere in the New England area, but may not be. But in Massachusetts, we do not recognize a living will. Massachusetts only recognizes a healthcare proxy. Most states recognize a living will. Some states will recognize both, just to really confuse it all. The difference is really that a living will says you have drawn up a document with a medical professional that says, this is type of care, this is what I want to see should X, Y, and Z occur. Should I need resuscitation, I want to be resuscitated. I want to be put on this life support system or not. That type of thing, that's in the living will. You are directing it. You dictate that down. The healthcare proxy says you are designating someone else to make that decision and to make that choice for you. And that's a situation that that individual should be considering what your wishes are, what you want to see happen, but at the same time, they're ultimately going to make the decision, and that decision is on them. If you wanted a DNR, but then they just ignore that, they can do that, because that's how a healthcare proxy works. The individual has the right to step over your wishes in that case. Most of the time they don't. Most of the case they'll just follow whatever your wishes were, since you should have a conversation with whoever you designate as your agent in the case of the healthcare proxy. But those are the three documents that you're going to get. You're going to get a will, durable power of attorney, and a healthcare proxy if you're in Massachusetts, which will cover pretty much everything that's going on. And then, as I mentioned, the durable power of attorney for healthcare, this is now would allow me to have that conversation should my daughter at school run into an issue or run into a medical concern or have a situation where the doctors are telling her to do one thing and she's not able to convey that to me. I can then step in and have the conversation with them on behalf of her because I have access to that.
So would that kind of be like the Monty Python provision? No, I'm not dead yet.
Not dead yet, yes. Please help me out here. I'm not dead yet. Right.
Take them. It's okay.
Yeah. And going through that, and that's part of it is they're not sure, and it might just be something that they're just unsure of, and they want you to have the conversation with the doctor. Well, the doctor in most cases, unless the individual, my daughter in this case, is sitting in the office with the doctor on the phone and allowing that to happen, that's about the only time that's going to occur. I can't call the doctor and say, hey, you're trying to prescribe this for my daughter, or why did you suggest that? Because the doctor can't have that conversation with me.
I got two questions for you, Tom.
Sure.
One is from Jacqueline, and she wants to know, is the durable power of attorney stronger than the healthcare proxy?
So
which supersedes the other?
No. So two different conversations, right? So one isn't stronger or more than another. So the durable power of attorney is handling anything as far as your affairs are concerned, your money, your assets, what's going on, those type of things, anything you need to sign for, anything that you're bill paying, those type of things, that's the power of attorney.
So POA would not give you medical authority, is what you're saying.
Correct. Right. If a power of attorney tries to go in and say no, she has a DNR or doesn't want to be, Jacqueline doesn't want to be resuscitated, or Jacqueline, wants life-saving measures, they're gonna look for a healthcare proxy for that, because that's what they're gonna look for. There's got to be a healthcare proxy somewhere in file to say this is the individual, and they need to see it.
And then Susan Loring has a question about, what about MOLST forms?
Right. So, the most forms are definitely something that should be part of the process. Gets a little bit more detailed in terms of what you're dealing with, and as far as trying to look into some of those different areas. But what we're talking about right now, Sue, just trying to get to the basics of building it out. That gets a little bit more into the next level with everything. But, that's getting into more with the guardianship, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. We're trying to file, and do I need to or should I? And go through it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to talk in a second now the letter of intent, because that's the sort of the last piece in this. We'll talk we'll go through, these are some steps to take and preparation. Guardianship, like I said, we'll touch on that and talk about a second. And financial security, that's always in there because it's always something to be thinking about. It sort of ties into the conversation with the government benefits. So letter of intent is not a legal document, right? But this is a directive of you conveying to the courts, to the guardian, to the executor, to the trustee, to whoever it may be, that these are the likes, dislikes. This is my child. These are some of the things that are working, not working, like I said, likes, dislikes, hobbies, habits, music, toys, bedtime, food, all of those conversations that and it's not a document. They consider it, and they definitely will look at it and go through it when it comes up, especially with the trustee, for going through some of that. But one of the things with it is it's not a, hey, I did it today, so it's like a will, like my will, which was 18 years old. I'm going to put it in a drawer and then leave it there. One of the things Craig and I say to everybody is that this should be a document that morphs over time, that you start it, whenever you want, but as the child ages and the child starts to have some things happen and maybe broadens out or tightens up, whatever the case may be, that all gets added to it. So sort of maybe like a once a year thing to go back and look at what was in the letter of intent last year, what has changed this year, and update and morph it as it goes along, because that's the way it should be. It should be this ongoing document that sort of takes all of this history into it, the biography, the medical history. Again, like I said, so living arrangements, education, religion, all those likes and dislikes,
Well, this is like when we had children, Tom. Well, you and I, we each have our own children, but you always go, geez, I wish this child came with an owner's manual or an instruction book, right?
Yes.
So this is really giving the guardian that instruction book, right? This is what sets the child off. This is what calms the child down. This is who they like being with. This is who they don't like being with. It gives you all the insight as to try at that point of, how to handle the situation if you're not in it.
Exactly. That's exactly the point of this. And like I said, it's not like, hey, I haven't the child is 14 or 15. I haven't started one. That's fine. But it may be you started it when the child was 10 and, maybe you haven't gone back to it. That happens a lot when we do stuff. You want to just make sure that this is something that you do take out every now and then and just review and update, because things change, right?
It's also helpful if you're getting married for the mother of the groom to give to the bride, right? The owner's manual for the son.
All right, I'm in an Italian household. I don't remember that happening, but I'm sure somewhere in there it probably did, right? So, and one of the tips that goes along with this is that, like I said, update it, they talk about doing it, select a day of the year to do that, maybe the child's birthday, maybe a date that you remember, your anniversary, or, just first day, last day of the year. It's just, something to trigger that, hey, wait, we should have this in the calendar, something we should do. And like I said, maybe it's the child's birthday, because then it, has you reminiscing and looking back over the last year and what occurred. This just talks about a lot of the different areas, right? So those daily routines we talked about, dislikes, fears, that's another one. Friends, social life, spiritual life, right? How are they? Those recreation and leisure activities, is there's a particular game they like to play, video, whatever the case may be. And certainly that the medical health history, concerns, medications, diets, everything that's in there. And then if there are doctors, physicians, medical people, advocates, social workers, that they are more like to than not absolutely keep all of that in there. right? That goes along with everything. And the letter of intent should be right there along with the will and anything else that you have as a document for this.
I don't know if I know this much information about myself.
Well, then I suggest you take a little step back and, put together your own little list for it. And then, there you go. I'm helping you out. Then you can give it to your wife and then say, hey, honey, here's who I am.
25 years later. Right?
Yes. All right. So we're going to start with some of the government benefits. And we'll go through these a little bit here. I'm going to touch on two of them in a little bit more detail. As far as how it works and going through it. And then we've got a follow-up that goes along with that. So Medicaid, right, here it's Mass Health, right, which is, federally funded. It's state level for everything. It's means tested, which just means that's asset-based and income-based. The asset-based situation, we'll talk about that in a second when we go through it, for Massachusetts anyway, and most states for the most part with that, is $2,000 of assets. It's reserved for families with limited resources. That's the means testing and low incomes. SSI, so Supplemental Social Security Income. So this is providing that monthly income, those basic needs, food, shelter, right? But it is also means tested. Again, that's amount, asset available, and income. And then the last one is SSDI. SSDI really, I'm not going to go too deep into SSDI after this, because while an individual may qualify who's aged out of the system, gone to age 22 and beyond, really to qualify, if they haven't worked, the parent has to either be claiming Social Security or have passed away, and then they would be eligible for SSDI. So, not something that's going to happen too often. Does happen, but it's less frequent. So Mass Health, right? So this is just a lot of words on the screen, just going through Mass Health. But the idea is that the assets that are non-countable, and I'll go through that on the next screen with SSI, it's have to be less than $2,000. And that's where we talk about where those gifts that can come, that's the reason with the power of attorney and making sure that there's conversations about what happens with the money if I pass away, because it's not a lot of money that can trigger that benefit to go away. And that's really the most important thing. And that's why we spend time in the other presentations talking about trusts and funding and ABLE accounts and how they all work with this, because you want to make sure you've got those other areas set up should something happen and money can pour over and be taken care of that way, versus, as was Jacqueline Craig who asked the question about the dual power of attorney, dual guardianship thing?
I believe.
Or Kirsten?
I think it was Jacqueline. Yes, Jacqueline should be a single person.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So in that situation, that where I made, my brother or sibling or someone else responsible with the money, and something happened there. I mean, that's the downside of that, is that the assets could pour over, right? So you just want to make sure that you're taking care of it. One of the things with Mass Health is if you qualify for SSI, generally you qualify for Mass Health. They sort of go hand in hand there, right? So again, it's the $2,000, right? You can't have the home and land that you live on, but life insurance policies that are in the name of the individual, not as a beneficiary, have to be owner, right? So that's where the beneficiary of a special needs trust or the beneficiary of a policy doesn't count against them. The car, again, all of this has to be less than $2,000. These are non-countable, right? That when you get in there, the burial plots, and then those funds. So you're somewhere between 18 and 65, you've never been married, you're a citizen in the United States, and you haven't had payments before, you should be able to apply. Everything right now is online, right? So, you know, that's a problem with SSDI, because SSDI for a minor is difficult, and they're not letting you do it online right now. All right, so these are the safety nets. You know, we talk about these benefits and going through it and how can you do it. It is, again, is a separate conversation to everything about, you know, the trusts and funding enable accounts and ways to have the money protected so that it can be there for the individual, but also then not count against them. One of the things we do, and this I had alluded to it a little bit a while ago, with the evaluation forms, we have a whole booklet that Craig and I that we put together. It's a roadmap to different government benefits. It does a little deeper dive into each of these. So when we send you the evaluation form, you know, like I said, there'd be a little gift to it. If you send it back, the evaluation form, we will immediately send you out the roadmap to government benefits just as a thank you for doing that. It's a simple booklet to go through. Find it a little bit helpful, but it's one of the things that we like to make sure that everybody gets a hold of, just as a way for you to do your own review and and go through and follow up on everything. One of the forms I'm bringing up here that you know Craig and I were talking about with this selective service, because I completely just didn't even think of this, that you know, if for males anyway, turning 18 have to sign up for selective service. So it's a form that's got to be done. That just, you know, it's the armed forces, and it's something that has to be done regardless of the disability. You still have to make sure that a male applies at this point. So just one of those, keep it in the, you know, I know it's if the child's getting older, that you make sure that that happens. Again, we'll talk about, because it leads into guardianship, because once they become 18, they're on their own unless you really, you know, step in and try to take total control of everything. So guardianship, you know, this is just a quote from one of the chapters on Autism Speaks, which was, you know, guardianship is the only way I can make sure that his mom and I will be able to advocate for what is necessary so we will be safe and happy. To secure this, I must prove to a court that my son is incapable of making decisions on his own. My wife and I must also choose someone to accept this responsibility when we are no longer alive, and we can know and who we can trust to carry out our wishes. So that gets into the whole trustee, you know, making sure that the person, along with that letter of intent, as Craig said, that sort of ties together how that all works. And, you know, so it's a fiduciary responsibility. The person is lawfully empowered. You charging them with acting on behalf of another individual in full guardianship. Now, we're talking about guardianship right now when the child reaches age of majority, i.e. is over 18. Under 18, you can name a guardian, but that guardian, that limit runs out. Craig, if I'm right, that limit runs out at age 18, right? So if you've got a 14 or 15-year-old, something happens to you, that guardianship ends at 18. Mm-hmm. If the child is unable to act or competently fend for themselves, then at that point you'd have to go for a full guardianship, and as an adult that becomes a more difficult conversation. Then you're really getting the courts involved, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're doing this before the child reaches 18, it's a conversation that can happen, but you're going through it. It's, you know, you want to make sure. So like this talks about, you know, again, designating guardian as part of the will for underage child. So that's the circumstance where the child has not reached 18 yet. You're picking a guardian. This is somebody who's going to be responsible until they turn 18, whoever that may be. Once the child becomes 18, they are an adult, they're on their own. This is a conversation that takes the next phase and gets into that really, and I've got a timeline that I go through in a couple of slides where we'll talk about that looking at that and making those critical decisions and coming to that juncture for it. But you definitely want to do for a child that might need full guardianship prior to, say, age 17, because the courts are taking anywhere from 6 to 9 months now to get this done.
Yeah. And this is another one of those things that it's easier to give that up than it is to get it.
Yes.
Let's say you're on the cusp and you're not sure because, you don't want to label your child or say they're not competent enough to make decisions, but maybe at 18, they're not ready yet for whatever reason, because most 18s who don't have a disability aren't ready to make their own decisions, right? So it's a matter of a maturity level. So, but if you wait till they're 18 to make that decision, like Tom just said, now you're going through the court and it becomes a battle. It may be an easy battle, but it's still a battle. Where if you get ahead of it when they're still a minor, it's a much easier argument, a much easier thing to get.
Right.
And like I said, if they become 21, 22, 23, and you see they're independent and you want to give that guardianship up, well, that's your choice. You can always give up guardianship.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's point, right? This talks about it as under 18, and then the next screen comes in and talks about, reaching age of majority and becoming, deciding to become a legal guardian.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's really whether or not somebody is able to competently act on their own behalf. And this gets into the conversation where, as Craig said, it's easier to drop it than it is to get it later on. But it brings the conversation back to, and why we brought up that durable power of healthcare, because maybe you just want to, have conversations with the doctors or the therapists, but not really get involved in any other aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one way of going about it, where you can limit the scope of what's involved. I know I had this question come up at some point about being a part or partial guardian. I know it can be limited, the scope for guardianship, but there's certain levels that you can get to with that, all right, and dealing with everything.
Everything's not black and white. It really is dependent on each situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then the next one that comes up is conservatorship. So conservatorship, unlike guardianship, conservatorship is really dealing with financial aspects. So this is almost like that power of attorney, but only for financial transactions. So anything that would require contracts, property, assets, being able to defend in a court of law, right? So those type of things, that's where it's very similar to guardianship, right? And sometimes they can be in tandem. You can have both. I'm guardianship and conservator, or one is guardian, one is conservator. But they generally want to make sure what's there. They'll want to make sure that the person who is the conservator is acting as a fiduciary. That is in the best interest of the individual. That there is no advantage that's being taken, that everything that's being done, anything that's being spent, that all has to be shown by a conservator once a year. They've got to go through and say, this is what we're doing, becoming that representative payee. That's a different version of it, for the assets that are coming in. But you have to be able to show, this is the reason these funds were spent, this is why it was spent, and do that on a yearly basis. And that's part of being a conservator, because you want to make sure that any of the funds that are being spent specifically to benefit the individual and the individual only.
Hey, Tom, we have another question.
Sure.
Actually, it's a kind of a kickback question, but still relates to what we're talking about. And actually, I think I might pick this one up myself. It says,
Go ahead.
Don't they have to, from Jacqueline, don't they have to be incapacitated for a POA to kick in? The answer to that is no. For a power of attorney to kick in, that's active as soon as it's signed. That person can sign for you. What you're talking about is a durable power of attorney. That kicks in when the person becomes incapacitated. And I've actually had, had some conversations with clients who are looking for a POA, especially when they get older. And I tell them, be very, very careful, because once you give someone the power of attorney, they are you. They can sign any financial document that you can sign, and they have the authority to do that. So you got to be very careful about that. And if you are looking to do a POA with somebody, you might want to limit the scope of that POA.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. And that's the concept and the idea there, so that the reason for suggesting or looking at putting those documents in place is to make sure that any of those areas or things that come up can get covered, because you have to start thinking about, gee, what else could happen and what else could come up. So when we're talking about guardianship, and before I do that, Craig, did you just want to talk a little bit about the
Guardianship versus caregiver status?
Yes. I knew
Yeah,
that was something I wanted to have mentioned there.
So I've had this happen with couples where we've come in and do some counseling with them, and they'll talk about, well, we both have guardianship of our child. A lot of times what happens is one of the spouses will maybe give up part-time or all of their work to stay home and take care of that child. So it's an income loss. What a lot of people don't realize is that in most states, I think it's 48 of the states, you can actually get some type of caregiver pay. It's different with every single state, and the requirements are different with every state. So in some states, you can't get paid if you are the parent, or the guardian, or the spouse. In Massachusetts, you can. So depending on what state you are, you got to look at what benefits are available, and those are usually through Medicaid. And that's why they're state-based. There's also some federal benefits as well, but that can be a significant source of income for somebody who is home taking care of their child. And I think adult family care, I think that's what Susan Loring is putting in, plus adult family care. So it is definitely a valuable resource. And it can be also, in this state, it can be with minors. In other states, it may not be able to be used with minors. So you got to look at each state's rules, but definitely something to consider when you're going into that situation.
Yeah, and thanks, Craig, because that was one of the things that because it has come up, right? It has been something that we have seen that, and dealing with. So just one of those, another thought, this goes back to that whole dual guardianship or, dual responsibility, that in most cases, it probably makes sense for one and then have a successor or a secondary for the other in terms of dealing with it. So like I said, with guardianship, have a little timeline that we put together, which really this talks about getting, to and through that age of majority, right? So I know it's kind of tough to see it on the screen and read it, but really the idea is the concept is at age 13 or so to be thinking about this, right? Starting that, should we, shouldn't we, where's this going? By age 16 to start putting that plan in place, and definitely by age 17 to have begun the process if you're choosing to go full guardianship, because it's going to take the courts some period of time. COVID just adds a delay to everything, and then it's going through and looking at as the child ages up, different things to be considering, right? So age 19, it's applying for, in this case, Mass Health, right? Age 18 to 22, possibly taking advantage of any vocational or other type of schooling that's available while they're still available for benefits in there. Age 26, everybody ages off, and my older daughter is whining about that at this point, having to go on to their own health insurance at that point. But really the timeline for this is more of those teen years from, say, 15 to 18 to really be setting up and deciding and making a game plan and following through on it to decide, well, we're just going to do conservatorship, or we're just going to do, we don't need full guardianship, we're going to do a power of attorney instead. Whatever the course or case may be, those are the years where that should be put in place. Those when you should be sort of formulating that idea and moving forward from there.
And that's another one of those things too, Tom, where I see a lot of clients, we get a lot of people who are coming to us, preactively, right? Well, something's already happened, they're trying to solve the problem, right? Rather than being proactive and being ahead of the curve. And some of the reason for that is very understandable. One, you're just trying to get through day to day, right? Trying to think about 2 or 4 or 5 years from now is very difficult. The other issue is sometimes people don't want to limit their child's potential. And they think by putting these plans in place, they're accepting they're going to have a limited potential. What I always say is it's easier once you have these things in place to back away from them than it is to try to put them in place after the fact. So
Correct.
very prudent to be ahead of this game. And anybody on this call is already looking at the fact that I need to make some decisions about some things.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic because you're ahead of the curve. You're thinking proactively. So, I give everybody credit for that.
Absolutely. And yes, that is absolutely the way to be with it, and to be thinking that way, sort of that forward thinking and processing and what makes sense in the great grand scheme of everything.
I got a question for you on this one from Jack.
Yeah.
Does the IEP go with them to college or work, or does it have to be changed over to a 504?
Yeah, so if following through in that, and I'm giving you my basic understanding with it, is that that has to be changed, right? So that's something that has to be, if college is in the works and there's something that's going to happen, that yes, the IEP does not continue from there. That's my understanding of it, and certainly we'll check through that and just come back to it with it. But that's how I understand it, is that IEP does not continue on. That's something that has to be updated and done differently.
Well, and two, if you're going into college, the reason you do the 504 is because you're looking for certain considerations, correct?
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so some resources, and like I said to you, so these are a lot of links that are in there, but they're just, places to go and to be thinking about with this. We'll share the screen with you. Like I said, we're going to share the recording, but this just gives a couple there, obviously SSI, MassGov Families Autism, Autism Insurance Resource Center, that's Mass AIRC. Autism Speaks, that's a transition toolkit that talks about a guide to help with those years, basically from 16 to 22, going through it. And then you've got Exceptional Lives Mass, which is another guide to go through and take a look at. So just some basic resources, some basic places to go. I'm sure you've seen some of them. In case you haven't, they're just places to tap into, take a look. If they got newsletters, sign up for the newsletter, see what they're saying, and just take a little bit of information from them. You're not going to be able to read this screen because it's just deep in terms of that. I can't even read it as I'm standing here, and God bless with that, But there's a whole bunch of different ones that really talk about, so you got Mass Health in there. There's some other, substance abuse and COBRA and Section 811 housing, Social Security, Medicare Savings Plan. You've got the Mass SNAP program, emergency food, just some basic things to be thinking about or looking at that you could potentially, or as the child becomes an adult, could have access to or want to use for that.
One piece of information, Tom, before you can move on too far.
Yeah.
This is from Sue Loring, and she chatted with everyone about it, but just to bring attention to it, she said the IEPs end with graduation, which we talked about. College students may qualify for disability services, but the onus is on the student to seek help. And he says colleges won't even talk with the parents except about the bill. But that's where I guess it's important to have the power of attorney in place if that's the case.
Right. Thank you, Sue, and appreciate that. Yes, that's what we had thought was the case, but appreciate that and chiming in and just reaffirming that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, and that's part of the conversation is they're adults now, right? So that's how you have to think of this. And that's why I was saying is, one of the things that specifically with my younger one who was headed off hopefully in the spring now, was about having that power of attorney for her when she is at UMass or any campus, depending on, away from the family and not there, to be able to have a conversation with her, to be able to talk to somebody about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the next
you were going into caregivers, so
caregivers, yes, yeah. So, well, this time, really part of this is about caring for the caregivers, which is all of you, but it's really about that ability to have respite, right? To take a break, and this they talk a little bit in terms of just this screen about, it's more of the way we look at it, Craig and I, about, you know, having permission to take a break, right? Find that time and that reason to be able to do it. You know, whether it's, if you know, in the COVID world now, everybody's home anyway in terms of dealing with it. But if you need to go find some place that you can, you know, listen to a favorite tune, just something, you know, a piece of music that's going to get you either relaxed or jazzed up, whichever the case may be in your need, find the place to be able to do that. You know, find to be able to go out and take a walk. You know, the support system, obviously Autism Resource Central is a tremendous support group and ability to tap into everything, and certainly the knowledge of Sue and the staff and everything that they're able to do. But a lot of times it's trying to find family members who can help, other parents who might be in a similar situation who can help. You know, those type of things. Realize that there are others who are going through a same or similar course, similar journey, similar path, and to be able to find those times, because it is important that you do take care of yourself. Now, I mean, with this whole pandemic thing, and some of the resources I'm going to talk about in a second are specifically geared towards Corona and what's happening there. Craig, anything you want to share with that in terms of the caregivers?
Sure. So, like, you know, I think, Tom, you hit most of it right on the head. I think that sometimes people get so caught up with having to take care of that person in their life that they forget about taking care of themselves, that they don't even think that they're relevant as far as that goes, that everything should be about taking care of the other people in their life. And the problem becomes is that, you know, no one planned that this was the situation they were going to be in. And so, you know, to have those feelings of guilt, if I can't do that for myself, that would be selfish. Well, what's selfish is not taking care of yourself, because then you're not in the best physical, mental, or other capacity, financial capacity, to take care of those people you're trying to support. So it's very, very important that you work in being able to, you know, have that time for yourself, so you don't, you know, feel pent up or frustrated or any of those other things that do happen to everybody. Because like I said, this is not what your plan had originally started out to be.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that. And so some of those resources, right, we already talked with Autism Speaks. Harvard Medical had actually a blog post they did on helping individuals with autism who are on the spectrum with masks and dealing with testing. You know, it's an issue as far as going through that. That childmind.org, again, there's some coronavirus tips and resources in there. Parenting with Special Needs, so they do an online magazine, autismsociety.org. And I put Easter Seals in there because Easter Seals is a very good organization, especially if we're looking for different ways for help. And I mean that by help for the caregiver, resources, respite, that type of thing. Easter Seals, very good organization at trying to help or provide some of those concepts, ideas, and resources for that.
You're right at the 8 o'clock hour, Tom, just so you're aware.
And just so you know, just right on that, final thought, see right there in terms of going through that. Perfect in terms of that. I appreciate that, Craig. Right, so if you haven't done a letter of intent, that's the first thing. If you take nothing else away from this, that should be, I should have or start or think about putting together and creating this letter of intent. Think about the timeline for transition. I know based on the conversation with Sue that most of you are parents of teenagers. You're right in that wheelhouse to be thinking about that transition timing, what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be dealing with it, what course or path do you want to be taking to do that. You know, decide about that guardianship, right? So like I said, that while 17 is not a hard line, it's getting right at that point that the process should probably beginning or start right then in terms of dealing with it. You know, at a minimum, that's that power of attorney. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you're sending even a typical child away, it's something to be thinking about and considering. You should have one on all of you, husband and wife and so on anyway, but also thinking about it for that child that's going away, that's now at a campus or someplace that's not that's an adult and away from you. Always, because one of the biggest things is always consider, you know, a special needs trust or funding options like an ABLE account or anything like that. We'll talk in a little bit, because that's something that's where Craig and I can help you out, or at least give you some thoughts and ideas in different directions for that. A little bit of fun with all of you, because this is Craig and I are more lighter when we like to say, you know, we try to take the information and education that we share with everyone very, very seriously, because we never want to take ourselves very seriously at all. So this is us having a little bit of fun. Those are our contact informations if you ever want to reach out and get a hold of us. If you've ever seen us at any of the conferences that we're generally in, those are Brady, but they say Moody Street on the back. We're going to have to, we talked about getting Cam Newton ones soon, because obviously the Brady thing is no longer valid.
And I just put duct tape over the two.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't even think of that. Color it in blue. One of the things we do that we've been doing for quite some time now, a little bit over a year plus, is every month we do what we call the Connections newsletter. And really all this does is gives all of the different organizations out there that are in the special needs community, if they're having events or trainings, conferences, walks, whatever the case may be, it's just a place where they can put their stuff, and we just broadcast it out to everybody. If you'd like to get on the mailing list, just send me or Craig, just send us a note. We'll put you on the mailing list. Comes out once a month and just lists everybody. It's pretty much throughout Massachusetts. We're getting better at it's getting some of the other regions, but we try to get every organization we can and do that. A little self-promotion here for Craig and I. One of the things that we did during the pandemic is we started a nonprofit. This is the Aries Foundation for Financial Education, Inc. I won't go too deep into it, but it's our way of trying to give back into the community. If you go to ariesfoundation.org, you can find out a little bit more about what we do, how we do it, but it's really our mission is trying to help everybody have a better relationship with their money and our give back, and that's really what it's all about. I mentioned to you previously about the evaluation forms. The reason it comes up twice is because we're very, we do really appreciate any of the input, any of the feedback we can get from anybody. One of the things that's on there is, and I'll mention it in a second, that if you do have questions or concerns, want to go a little bit deeper, maybe have some thoughts or some things that you want to go over, there is a checkbox on there that says, yes, please contact me. I'd love to set up a time, talk to you, or no. I will tell you this, our promise to all of you, our promise to Sue and to everybody at HMEA is if you check no on that box, you are never going to hear from us. You'll never get you'll get a piece of correspondence, which will just be that we sent you the evaluation form. But you send the evaluation form back to us, we'll send you the roadmap to government benefits, and then you'll never hear from us. If you got questions, you know how to get a hold of us, you can reach us. But if you check no, it's our promise. We will never reach out to you. We'll never get anything from us. That's the offer. The offer is that, hey, it's a complimentary consultation. We don't charge for it. There's no cost. You can ask us any questions. If you want to get in contact with some other, whether it's another professional, we have a network. That's what the Special Needs Network is all about, that we can try to help connect you to somebody else if that's necessary. But we just want to make sure that you get your questions answered, that we're able to help you and guide you and give you some advice, so at least maybe help you along the path wherever you may be on the journey. And Sue, this one is for you because there is still some time to do some greater good. In case you didn't know it, Autism Resource, along with the Greater Good Imperial Brewery in Worcester, Mass. If you go to Greater Good up until the end of October, make a purchase, you can actually donate an additional $2, which I did last Friday, Sue, because that's where I went after golf, was to Greater Good, picked up some brew there. But you can go to the Imperial Brewery, make a purchase, and then add a donation of $2 on, and they will send it right to Autism Resource Central. So
Sue said they just extended that offer out to the end of November.
Oh, even better. Look at that. I'll have to add that in. See, we'll put that in for a newsletter for November. We'll add that in, that it's been extended. that's tremendous. That's a great thing. And you know, they're real easy to do, and you know, they're not too hard to find. So if you enjoy it, you know, they've got a lot of funky beers. If you do enjoy the craft beer, it's a good thing to do. And like I said, it benefits Autism Resource Central at the same time.
So I got two questions for you, Tom.
I was just going to ask if you had questions.
The first one is, where are they in Worcester?
You know what? That's a wonderful question. I can tell you they're exactly
Ask me. Yes.
11 minutes from Cyprian Keys. That's about all, you know, my GPS told me how to get there. They're right off 290. They're in a little industrial building.
Millbrook Street. That's Millbrook Street.
Millbrook Street. Well, see, I didn't know because, you know, I was following the GPS because I was a soggy mess. The poor guy, I walked in, he looked at me like, were you golfing? I'm like, yeah, I was out on the course. But hey, it was for this event, so just so you know, it ties all in there.
Well, just past Chick-fil-A was the next follow-up. And the other question I want to know is the beer made with real moose?
That is just their thing. They get real funky with some of these beers, like I was having the Oktoberfest. That's actually pretty good, but they've got some real fusion infused beers there that are quite funky in terms of, you know, depending on how crazy you want to get. They're actually very, very good.
And just to be self-serving, but you may talk more about this beer tomorrow for Think with a Drink, right?
Yes. So part of the, you know, there we go. So there is some before we let you go. Every Thursday we do a weekly webinar at 4:30. That's the Aries Foundation. We call it Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays, or what Craig and I like to share with everybody is Think with a Drink. In which case tomorrow I will have, and Sue, just so you know, I'm going to be promoting the Greater Good Oktoberfest because, like I said, I bought a bunch of that. But at the same time, I'll also do a plug for the $2 give back. And now I know that it's through November, so I'll add that in, that they can then stop by anytime between now and the end of November and add to Autism Resource. And any other questions, Craig?
I got nothing else in the chat box.
Okay. That's everything that we had for you this evening. Hopefully this gave you some things to think about, gave you some information to deal with. Like I said, what you'll get from us, you'll get that evaluation form. If you please take the time, send it back to us. We will then send you out the roadmap to government benefits, and we'll take it from there.
All right, thank you, and good night to you too, Susan.
Okay, Susan said something?
No, she said thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night. Yeah, so she's hurting. She had a tooth removed. Well, I appreciate that, everybody. Thanks for your time this evening, and I'm going to stop it at this point.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.